Long before white settlement in Australia, literature suggests that the Chinese Muslim explorer Zhang He had navigated our Australian shores in the early 15th century. In the early 1700s, Muslims from Macassar began to arrive on the shores of Australia. The Macassans, a sturdy band of Indonesian Muslims, ventured across the stormy Timor Sea to trade with Aboriginal tribes of northwestern Australia. This was the start of not only an important tradition, but also of the beginning of history of Muslim people in Australia. After white settlement in the 1860s, another group of Muslims were invited to Australia as guest workers on a mission to conquer the vast inland.
Someone had the bright idea that camels would survive in the Australian remote, and they were right, because there weren't the railways built. It was rough terrain, lack of water, etc. And the Englishmen who knew British India at the time realised that if they wanted camels, they needed men who could handle camels. And that's how the first group of Afghans were brought here.
My dad, he was Afghan. He came out in the early years, probably around about 1894. And I think he landed at Port Augusta, I think it might have been, a place called Port Augusta, South Australia. He was there for a while, and then from there he must have came to Broken Hill, because I've seen little clippings in the paper where he'd been here in 1905. I think Grandad had a run. He used to go up the Tibberbar Road, across to Wilcannia, White Cliffs, and back this way he used to go up the Wentworth Road. So he had a pretty good run, he had a pretty good name too, you know. So if it weren't for them and a few of the other white camel drivers, they wouldn't have ever got any mail or nothing into the outbacks, especially in the wet.
The Afghan cameleers were what I call the silent pioneers. Silent because their contribution has largely been unrecognised. They've never been, until recently, they were not part of Australia's pioneer history, but they opened up remote areas. They carried water, they carried mail, they carried goods, mining machinery. Without the camels, Australia would not have been able to advance because the bullocks and the horses could just not manage that rough terrain.
Go inside and have a look. Of course, you've got to take your shoes off before you go in. And I'll show you into their prayer room here. Got all the mats and everything in here where they come and do their prayers. It'll be very hot here in the summertime too. And you can see up on the ceiling that what it was built out of back in the early days. I'd say the head man comes up here. The leader, he comes up here. And all the rest of them get on the mats behind him and do their praying.
They were good Muslims. They unrolled their mats in the desert or in the bush and they prayed 5 times a day. They weren't fortunate in that they didn't have the community.